Such a silly girl. I guess that's what happens when your mom isn't a Harvard grad. Huh? Karen sneered at Sarah, her smirk cutting through the air. I had tolerated the jabs aimed at me for years, but using my daughter to hurt me? That was too much. We didn't need a grandmother who would wound Sarah just to insult me. The anger boiled up inside me, like a fist clenched in my mind. I am Susan, a 35-year-old mother of a first grader. Sarah. I juggle part-time work with most of the housework and childcare since my husband, Richard, is constantly busy with his demanding medical job. I love Sarah more than anything, and Richard appreciates everything I do. So for the most part, I'm content with our life, except for Karen. One weekday, Karen called, saying she needed a ride to the hospital. Since I was off work, I picked her up, knowing what kind of company I'd have to endure. We sat in the hospital lounge when Karen nudged my shoulder. Hey, Susan, can you figure out this crossword clue? I glanced at the magazine in her hand. What's the clue? 4 feet tall, over 2 pounds, member of the woodlouse family, and the world's largest isopod. What is it? I furrowed my brow. I don't know. What could it be? Karen chuckled, her laugh dripping with superiority. It's a giant isopod. Susan, you've never heard of it? Oh, I see. My cheeks flushed with embarrassment. You really are uninformed. Susan, my daughter Lisa knew it right away. Harvard students just know things like that. I bit my tongue, the urge to snap back almost too strong to control. It was always like this with Karen, taking every opportunity to belittle me. The fact that I was doing her a favor didn't seem to matter in the slightest. Karen's condescension wasn't new. She constantly found ways to make me feel inferior, always comparing me to Richard's sister, Lisa, who had graduated from Harvard and now held a prestigious position in government. I understood being proud of her, but Karen's way of praising Lisa always came at the expense of demeaning me. She asked questions I couldn't possibly know the answers to, mocked my part-time job, and repeatedly reminded me that I wasn't as accomplished as Lisa. It was exhausting. Ironically, Lisa wasn't nearly as arrogant as her mother. When we met during holidays, she was quiet and reserved, often retreating to her room or staring out at the courtyard. She barely spoke to me, and when we were left alone, the awkward silence was suffocating. Karen, oblivious to this, continued singing her praises at every gathering. Richard, used to his mother's antics, just nodded along, sharing the same childhood stories about Lisa that I had heard countless times. During these visits, Richard's father, Daniel, would quietly observe, not one to get involved, and Lisa, the subject of all this admiration, simply ate in silence, never joining in the bragging or belittling. Visiting my in-laws was always uncomfortable, but lately, Karen's remarks had become unbearable. I could deal with her disrespect toward me, but when she turned her sharp tongue on Sarah, it was the final straw. That summer, we made our usual visit to Karen and Daniel's home. Lisa was there, sitting quietly in the living room as always. We sipped coffee while Sarah, full of energy, chatted with her grandmother. Karen adored Sarah, and Sarah loved her back, enjoying the attention from her doting grandmother. It was the main reason I tolerated these visits. I didn't want to come between Sarah and her relationship with Karen. How's school, Sarah? Karen asked. Did you get 100 on your tests? I rolled my eyes but kept quiet. It seemed like harmless conversation, something a first grader might be excited to talk about. I didn't think Karen would say anything to hurt her, but I was wrong. School's fun, Sarah beamed, but I got a 90 on my last test. Karen's eyes narrowed. A 90, huh? What did you get wrong? I did addition instead of subtraction in one of the math problems, Sarah said, her smile faltering a little. Karen's smirk returned. Such a silly girl, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Then, turning to me, she added, I guess that's what happens when your mother didn't go to Harvard. Sarah blinked, clearly confused by the comment, but I felt my blood boiling. How dare she say that to Sarah? To use my daughter to insult me? I couldn't hold back any longer. I let out a frustrated sound, loud enough to make everyone turn and look. Karen's face twisted into a smug smile, knowing she had struck a nerve. Unbelievable. I had tolerated her insults for years, but this was too far. I could take her jabs at me, but hurting Sarah? That was unforgivable. I was done. Karen had crossed a line, and I would never let her hurt Sarah again. Mom, what are you saying? I could feel my anger building, ready to burst. But just as I was about to let loose, Richard stepped in, his voice calm and firm. Aw. The timing. I mentally fumed, shooting a glare his way. He didn't notice, too focused on trying to correct Karen's latest insult. Susan and Sarah are incredibly smart, Richard began, his tone serious, maybe even smarter than Lisa. Karen scoffed dismissively. Oh, Richard, it's sweet that you want to defend them, but let's not embarrass ourselves with such nonsense. Don't be naive. It's not nonsense, Richard insisted. Susan and Sarah are members of Mensa. Mensa? For the first time that day, Lisa leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with curiosity as she sized up me and Sarah. Karen, on the other hand, stood frozen, her smug expression faltering. Yes, Mensa, I chimed in, surprised by Lisa's sudden interest. Turning to Karen, I feigned surprise. Oh, didn't you know about Mensa? Karen's face reddened. I know it. That thing, she stammered. Richard chuckled, trying to ease the tension. Mensa is a society for people with high IQs. Karen, worldwide. Lisa, unusually animated, added, only people in the top 2% of IQs qualify. Susan and Sarah both made it in. Karen blinked, struggling to process the information. What, a no-name college woman like her? She's lying. It's not a lie, I said, pulling out my phone to show her the digital membership card. Karen snatched it from me, squinting at the screen. This is just some image you found online. Show me the real thing. I rolled my eyes. I don't carry it around like a driver's license. Karen, I'm not one to show off, like some people. My words dripped with sarcasm, and to my surprise, Lisa burst into laughter. Karen's glare shifted between us, fury flashing in her eyes. That can't be, Karen shouted, looking desperately at Lisa. You're the Harvard grad. You're an elite. Tell her she's lying. But Lisa, still amused, shrugged. It's true. Mensa only accepts the top 2% in IQ. Susan and Sarah are in that 2%. Karen's smile twisted into something unrecognizable. Her voice trembled. IQ over 130, right? 130? How is that possible? She turned her trembling fingers toward me, as if pointing at a ghost. Her? Special? Impossible. She's just a low-level woman who can barely hold down a part-time job. Richard, usually gentle and patient, had had enough. He brushed Karen's hand away and took a step toward me, his protective stance unmistakable. Susan could do anything she wants, he said, his voice steely. She's focusing on our family, for me and Sarah. She has passive income. She doesn't need to work for validation like you seem to think. Passive income? Karen's eyes widened. She looked bewildered, caught off guard by this new revelation. Sarah, sensing the shift in the room, came over and wrapped her arms around me, beaming with pride. My mom's the best. I'm amazing too. Next month, I'm competing in a math contest hosted by the American Mathematical Society. A math competition by the American Mathematical Society? That's incredible. Sarah beamed with pride, her joy catching Karen off guard. Lisa gently patted Sarah on the head. That's really impressive for someone your age. Maybe it's because of Susan's great teaching? No, I think it's more of a family trait, I said. Mom struggled socially because of her high intelligence, so she enrolled me in Mensa to help me avoid the same challenges. That's how I discovered Sarah's potential and got her into Mensa, too. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. Susan, you're lucky to have such a supportive mother. I didn't quite catch her last words and asked, what did you say? It's nothing, just us, she replied with a smile. What kind of patents do you have, Susan? Lisa asked suddenly, her usual quietness replaced by curiosity. Industrial and informational, I answered, surprised but pleased by her interest. Lisa's eyes sparkled as she delved deeper into the conversation, and I found myself enjoying it, too. Of course, Karen wasn't amused. Lisa, no way, this woman is more accomplished than my Lisa? That's ridiculous, Karen blurted out. Mom, Richard said, frowning at her outburst. though Karen seemed too worked up to notice, discovering that I, the person she had always belittled, had both a high IQ and patents, seemed to unsettle her. Just because someone has a high IQ doesn't mean they're special. I struggled to make friends growing up. Acting superior because you think you're special is the worst kind of person. I wasn't trying to brag. I was just being honest. I enrolled Sarah in Mensa so she could thrive without facing the struggles I did. Some people use their intelligence for prestigious careers, but many face challenges because of it. Lisa praised me. But a high IQ doesn't guarantee success. It's not about who's more impressive. That's why I usually ignored Karen's snide remarks. Though this time, it seemed to hit a nerve. Her face flushed with anger as she glared at me. Richard looked at his mother with disappointment. It's you who's looking down on people. Mom, you've been making nasty comments about Susan. But Lisa is amazing. My brilliant child. It's fine to be proud of Lisa, Mom, but that doesn't give you the right to insult Susan and Sarah. But enough. Let's go home. Susan. We calmly gathered our things, and Richard led us to the car. Lisa, unusually apologetic, followed us to the door, repeatedly saying how sorry she was. Behind her, Karen stood biting her thumbnail, muttering to herself. Later, Richard and I discussed Karen's behavior, and he apologized. It wasn't entirely his fault. I hadn't brought up the issue sooner, thinking it wasn't a big deal. He promised that unless Karen changed, we wouldn't have to visit again. Though it seemed unlikely that Karen would change. A week later, I got a call from her. Unsurprisingly, it wasn't an apology. Hand over Sarah, she demanded the moment I answered. Excuse me? I asked, completely thrown by her outrageous demand. You may have a high IQ, but you didn't go to a top school and can't provide Sarah with the best education. I'm the one who got Lisa into Harvard. I should be the one raising Sarah. I was too baffled to be angry. What? Sarah deserves better. I'll make her a child who contributes to society. Absolutely not, I said firmly. Karen was stunned by my refusal, as if she had never expected it. You can't possibly provide for her education. I raised Lisa and got her into Harvard. That's Lisa's achievement, Karen, not yours. What else do you have to brag about besides Lisa? She hesitated, clearly caught off guard. Anything? Exactly what I expected from Karen. Her usual confidence had evaporated. That's what I thought. You've been riding on Lisa's success. But you're empty. Instead of projecting your ambitions onto Lisa and Sarah, why don't you improve yourself? If you want to make a difference, do something yourself. How dare you speak to me like this? I'm Richard's mother. If you're so capable, why not get into Harvard yourself? If you manage that, maybe I'd consider your request. Until then, this conversation is over. Before she could respond, I hung up. Karen kept calling, but I ignored her every time. I'll listen when you've got a Harvard graduate, I said calmly. Karen, of course, complained to Richard about my so-called rudeness, but his only response was, good luck with your entrance exams. Gradually, Karen's calls dwindled, and peace seemed to return, at least, for a while. But Karen didn't give up. Determined to outdo me, she shifted tactics. She began pushing Lisa to marry quickly and have children, hoping to produce a grandchild more accomplished than mine. But Lisa wasn't interested. Mom forced me to study and took away my freedom. I won't do the same to my own child, Lisa had declared, putting an end to Karen's schemes. For the first time, Karen was faced with Lisa's true feelings. She had believed her strict parenting was appreciated, but instead, it had felt suffocating to Lisa. Her childhood had been marked by endless study and little room for anything else. Richard, far from envying the attention Karen lavished on Lisa, had always pitied her for the overbearing education she endured. Karen, in truth, had treated parenting like playing with dolls, manipulating and controlling instead of nurturing. But Karen would never admit she had been wrong. Fed up with her mother's constant meddling, Lisa eventually changed jobs and moved away in secret, now estranged from her daughter and disconnected from the family that held her only grandchild. Karen spends her days alone, weeping in a house that no one visits. My parenting wasn't wrong, she clings to the neighbors, but they've grown tired of her constant boasting and offer little sympathy. As Karen wails to anyone who'll listen, Daniel remains indifferent. With no one left to impress and no audience for her endless comparisons, Karen must be under a tremendous amount of stress. It's a fate of her own making. How do I know all this? Lisa told me. Is this the right answer? Sarah asked one afternoon. Correct. Well done, Sarah. You're so smart and adorable. I praised her. These days, Lisa often comes by for study sessions with Sarah in our living room. After that fateful day at the in-laws, she apologized to me. I'm sorry I didn't stand up to Mom sooner, she said, clearly regretful. Having suffered under Karen's controlling ways for so long, Lisa had become numb to it. But seeing how I cared for Sarah woke something up in her. Now, Lisa and I have grown close, often chatting over coffee at my house. Sarah, with her bright mind and kind heart, adores Lisa and is fascinated by her knowledge. Lisa, let's play this one next, Sarah said, holding up a complex board game with excitement. Of course, Lisa replied with a warm smile, her eyes glowing with affection. As I made Lisa's favorite chamomile tea, I sat back and watched them, content in the peaceful, happy scene unfolding before me.